Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES for 10% off any purchase over $10. If you use that promo code between now and January 28th, you will automatically be entered in a drawing to win a Ravnica Allegiance booster box. Check out the description below for details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and this is our Ravnica Allegiance Prerelease Primer. We do one of these primers before every pre-release, and this is a little more geared towards newer players. Maybe you've never gone to one of these tournaments before, you need to know what to bring, what to expect. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to build a sealed deck generally. We're also going to talk about the mechanics and some of the strategies you might find within the set. Quickly before we get started though, just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to support the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon down below, and that means anything you buy on Amazon. Once you go through one of those links, we'll get a small percentage. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save a little cash while you support us. But as always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to each and every one of you. Y'all make the channel what it is, so thank you, and let's get into it. Alright, the big question, what should you bring? And the first thing is knowledge. Call the game store ahead of time, find out the details. Where are they located? And what's it going to cost to play in the tournament? What times are there tournaments? What kinds of tournaments are there? It could be a regular one or a two-headed giant. What is their tournament format? Is it 4 rounds of Swiss? That's pretty typical. However, I've seen 3 rounds of Swiss, 5 rounds of Swiss. I've seen some stores perform longer tournaments where they actually play more like a normal tournament and have a cut to the top 8. That could be a longer day. This is all information you probably want to know going in. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with what the term Swiss means, basically it means you can play every round. So if it's 4 rounds of Swiss, even if I lose every round, I can still play. I don't get eliminated. Then prize payouts are just based off how many wins I got during the course of the day is all. And prize payouts can be different. A lot of times they're tied into the entry fee too, which could vary by store. So keep that in mind. Now, the other thing that's nice about calling ahead of time is some stores will let you pre-register. That means you might be able to get your spot secured, especially if spots are limited in some smaller stores. Or in some cases, they might let you lock in your guild because you do get to select your guild and you can only select one until supplies last, right? So if you get to the store and they're out, you might have to play something different. This hopefully will alleviate that. Now, what should I physically bring with me? Pen and paper. Take it with you. You're going to appreciate it. If you've never played in a tournament before, you might need to fill out a DCI form to get your DCI number. That's going to require a pen. A lot of stores will just have you fill out a form with your DCI number for registration purposes anyway. And I've seen stores not have pens. You have to borrow pens or wait in line for a pen. Or worse yet, I've seen stores sell pens. You don't need to be buying a pen during the pre-release. It's a waste of money. Also, pen and paper can help you keep track of things going on in the game state. Now, you will get a spin down die that you can use to keep track of your life total, and that's going to come in your pre-release kit. But if you're thinking you might want to play in a Magic Fest later this year or something like that, it's not a bad idea to get into the habit of keeping track of life totals on pen and paper. That's kind of the more preferred way when it comes to a more serious tournament. Don't have to do that in a pre-release, but you might want to think about it for the future anyway. Other than that, spin down die would just be fine. Also, I would bring some extra dice aside from that spin down die. There are +1/+1 counters used pretty frequently in this set. Dice will help you keep track of that. It doesn't have to be anything fancy like you see on the screen here. It could just be some 6-sided dice that you can pull out of a board game or something like that even. But that will help you just keep track of things that are going on the battlefield. Also, your pre-release kit does work kind of like a deck box, but it is pretty flimsy. It's cardboard, paper, and if you put it in your backpack, it could get knocked around. It could get knocked open. Your cards could spill, which might be awkward if you're playing in more than one event and you're trying to keep your pool intact. Maybe you can put the cards you're thinking about trading after the event into a different spot or a different box, or you could bring a small trade binder for that too. Either would work. Sleeves. Now, some people don't care about the condition of their cards. They just want to play. But even if you don't care, I would still recommend sleeves because if you play on a dirty table, cards get very tacky quickly. By round 4, your cards are going to be dirty and sticking together by the time you try to shuffle, and that can be awkward. So bring some sleeves, bring extra sleeves in case one breaks, and you don't have to buy a whole new set at the game store. That is another expense you might just not need if you already have sleeves. And another thing you might want to consider when it comes to sleeves, you might want to pre-sleeve some basic lands and bring them from home. Now, game stores will provide basic lands at these tournaments, but Think of it this way. The time that you take to go get your lands, and that means you have to get up, go to the land station, wait in line, dig through the cards, get your lands, bring them back and sleeve them. That's all time you could have been building your deck. So the more time you can focus on your deck, the better off you're going to be. If you have some lands pre-sleeved, it's going to save you tons of time. Now, some people like to play with playmats too to keep their cards clean, but I'll tell you, if I'm just playing this pre-release, I wouldn't necessarily spend the money on a playmat. I would just use the sleeves. But if I'm going to play at stores or tournaments frequently in the future, eventually I probably would want to buy a playmat. The last thing that I would mention that's not pictured here is food and drink. Bring something healthy. Bring some water, bring some granola bars, something like that. Because these could be long days, depending on what kind of tournament you're in. Even if it's just a 4-round tournament of Swiss, that's 4 rounds. Those are going to take about 50 minutes to an hour apiece. Then you got the in-between time, and then you have the deck building time and the pass out of product time and all that. It could be a pretty long day. You're going to get hungry, you're going to get thirsty, and you're not going to play well if that's the case. So have some food and drink with you that's healthy. Now, stores a lot of times will sell soda, candy, maybe even bottled water, but I found that if I have some healthy food, I can concentrate better. And also, even if I want to buy bottled water, it's going to be really expensive at a game store, so you're better off just bringing your own. Alright, here are your pre-release kits. First, let's talk about what's inside. You're going to open one of these up, and you're going to find that spin down life counter that I mentioned. There's a little piece of paper that gives you very little detail about building a deck typically, and a little bit of flavor detail about your guild. Also, you'll get a redemption code to play a traditional draft on Magic Arena. And you're going to get 5 packs of Ravnica Allegiance, and you're going to get a seeded pack, and that's going to coincide with the guild itself. So that seeded pack is going to have cards that fit into that guild. They are kind of like a normal booster pack, though, except your rare or mythic rare, depending, is going to be within your guild, of course, and it's going to be a foil card with the date stamped on it to commemorate the pre-release. So that's kind of cool, right? Now, you can build a deck with your 5 regular packs and that seeded pack. Any of those cards that are in those packs are free game. We'll talk more about deck building in just a moment. But a lot of people ask me, which one of these guilds should they choose? Which is better? Some got to be better than others, right? Alright, my first answer is pick the one that's going to be fun for you. Now, the thing about pre-releases, they're casual events. They're meant to be fun. So the prize payouts aren't super big or anything like that. I'm sure you'll find some people that are taking them overly seriously, but at the same time, most people are going to be very nice, very welcoming. They'll be there to help out new players and make you feel like you want to come back again. That's been my experience anyway. So at the end of the day, is it about winning, going 4-0 in these tournaments? No, it's about having fun, so pick the guild that's fun. Okay, if you really want to win, here are my picks for the best and worst. I would say this, I don't think there's really a bad guild here, but I do think blue in a sealed event is going to be strong in this set. I feel like this set's going to be a little grindier compared to Guilds of Ravnica. Maybe not as grindy as Dominaria, but definitely more grindy than the last environment. So I think blue will be good. Azorius, I think, will be strong. I think Simic's going to be very strong too. They have a lot of control elements in there as well. Next, I would say Gruul is kind of in the middle. I do like the Riot mechanic, and I think you can build a really good Gruul deck around that. Now, kind of towards the bottom, I picked Rakdos and Orzhov. And I do think that these are going to be more powerful in a draft environment. In fact, as a draft environment, I may pick Rakdos and Orzhov as being the more powerful of the guilds. But for sealed, even with the seeded pack, I don't know if they're always going to be as consistent. Now, having said that, I think you could open a Rakdos or Orzhov pool, and it could just be killer, and you could go 4-0. But I do think you need a very specific pool to get that to happen, where I do think the other guilds are going to be a little more forgiving for sealed. When you open your packs, you don't have to play the guild you selected. Now, that might mean losing some of the cards in your seeded pack sometimes, but if you have better cards in other colors, just go in that direction. Nothing's forcing you to stay in the guild you chose. Remember that. Alright, time to build your sealed deck. A few things you need to know. When it comes to your lands, you want about 16 to 18. 17 is a nice average. 23 playables and 17 lands is usually what's going to happen. But your deck could also be a little more low curve. For example, if I'm playing a Rakdos deck and maybe my most expensive things are 5, perhaps I could get away with going 16 lands and 24 playables. Or maybe I'm in a Gruul deck with a lot of big creatures with trample. I might go 18 lands and just go with 1 less playable there. Also remember, the minimum amount of cards in your deck will be 40. Some people say, I really like this card or that card, maybe I should go with 41 or 42. For the most part, you never want to do that because at the end of the day, there's going to be one card in there that's not as good as the others, and why are you going to create a situation where you're not going to be able to get to your best cards ever, right? So if you're tempted to play 41 or 42 cards, try not to. Try to stick to 40. Your deck will be stronger that way. Okay, in sealed, creatures are usually a big focus of the game. Board presence is everything. Now, there are exceptions because, again, maybe you're in Azorius, which is going to be more non-creature spell heavy, and that can be okay. But in general, you want 15 to 17 creatures. Now, as far as your curve goes, 1-drops sometimes are a little disappointing, and you don't see a whole lot of them. So I would say 0 to 2 1-casting cost cards. So if you have some good ones, and there are some good ones in this set, then wonderful. Now, the second spot in your mana curve, the 2 spot, is the most important. You want 4 to 6 cards in that spot, because basically 2-drops are going to be strong enough to make a difference almost all the time, even if it's just a 2/2 for 2 with no other abilities. It's nice board presence and keeps you afloat in the early portion of the game. The third spot is the second most important spot. You want 3 to 5 spells there. Your fourth spot, now you want to start going down a little bit, 2 to 4. You don't want to be too top heavy. 5 mana spells, 1 to 3, and then finally 6 or more mana spells, 0 to 2. You might have some big bomb rares over here that might cost a lot, but just don't go overboard. You don't want to put too many of those high cost spells in your deck or you'll just never get to them. Alright, let's talk archetypes real quick. Now, you might say, well, archetypes are probably more important in draft, but because you're getting the seeded pack especially, there's a lot of opportunity to focus in on what these guilds are trying to do individually. We're going to begin with Azorius. Okay, so Azorius has a mechanic called Addendum. Basically, the way it works is if you play the card on your main phase, you get a bonus. In this case, you see Sphinx's Insight. It costs a blue, a white, and 2, instant draw 2 cards. Typically, I would use that at the end of my opponent's turn, keeps my mana open, keeps my opponent guessing. But now I have a reason that I might actually want to play this on my turn. Now it just depends on the situation. At times, you might want to wait, play it on your turn. Other times, you might want to play it on the opponent's turn as an instant. It just depends on where the game is at that moment. But watch for those opportunities. Now, the other thing that's important to know generally is what Azorius is trying to do as a color combination. They are trying to build a control deck, but they want to own the skies. So you're going to see a lot of flyers, and then the idea is you get some of these flyers out, and then you control the board with either destroy spells or counter magic, and you just win with those flyers. They just keep getting in there, and you just try to stop anything that's going to try to prevent them from getting their damage across. Alright, Simic also has some control elements, but they are definitely more focused on creatures and +1/+1 counters. Now, on your right, you see a card with Adapt, and that's the big mechanic for Simic. The way Adapt works is you'll have a card that will say Adapt in a number. That number represents how many +1/+1 counters the card will get if you choose to adapt it. Now, there's an Adapt cost. Now, for Sharkdo Crab, that's a blue, green, and 2. If I pay that, I put 1 +1/+1 counter on this card because it has Adapt 1. However, I can only do that if the card has no +1/+1 counters on it. Now, you might find cards that remove +1/+1 counters, and if that's the case, I could adapt this, later on remove the counter for some kind of benefit, and then if that happens, I could adapt again if this has no counters on it. So, adapt is a little different than monstrous that we've seen in the past that you can only do once no matter what. This you can do it as long as there's no counters on it. Now, the other thing to consider is that you can adapt anytime you have priority. So you can do that during combat. I could attack in with a bunch of adapt creatures if I have open mana. My opponent is going to have a hard time blocking those creatures because I'm going to make the decisions as to which creatures to adapt after they make their blocking decisions and before the damage goes through. So that's another added bonus to the adapt mechanic generally. Now, overall, what's Simic trying to do? They're trying to put out creatures, they're trying to make them big with these +1/+1 counters, and then they're trying to control the ground. A lot of times they're going to tap down creatures. You're going to find some tempo plays in blue that will help you with that. And that's their game plan for winning. Next is Orzhov, and they want to win kind of through this death by 1,000 cuts plan. They're going to do a little damage here, a little damage there, gain a little life here, gain a little life there. Their mechanic is the afterlife mechanic, which means if a creature has afterlife, and again, it can be 1, 2, 3, for example, but when that creature dies, you're going to get that many 1/1 white and black spirit creature tokens with flying. So for example, Night of the Last Breath, if that creature were to die, and that means go to the graveyard from the battlefield. So if it gets exiled, sorry, you don't get your afterlife tokens. But if it dies, battlefield to graveyard, then you will get those 3 flying tokens. Then hopefully at some point you can just swarm with these little tokens. And again, they're only 1/1s typically, but it's a little damage here, a little damage here, a little damage here. It's all going to add up. Now on the left side, you even see a card that gains life. Like I said, that is part of this plan as well. I'm racing my opponent by doing a little damage here, a little damage there, gaining some life. Eventually, I'm just going to be able to pull ahead. That's the whole idea. The other thing Orzhov can do well is play into an aristocrats theme, and what that means is basically sacrifice for benefit. You'll have cards in black that will say if you sacrifice a creature, you get X, Y, or Z. And in this case, you could sacrifice an afterlife creature and find extra value, or maybe you could sacrifice one of these little tokens for an ability. Rakdos. Okay, Rakdos also plays into that aristocrats theme I was mentioning earlier with Orzhov, so keep that in mind. Sometimes in sealed, you're not going to just stick to 2 colors. You might splash a 3rd color, or go even deeper than that. You might have a Mardu deck that's working around this aristocrat sacrifice or benefit plan. That could be pretty interesting. So always keep your mind open to those type of things. Once you know what 2 colors do well together, it's not hard to see how a 3rd color can come in and help, especially within this set. It's kind of designed that way. So what else does Rakdos do? Rakdos wants to attack. They want to put a lot of small creatures in. They want to use burn spells that can go to the face. They just want to keep attacking and race the opponent. They might take some damage back, but they want to do it faster. Now their keyword ability plays into that. It's called Spectacle. And what will happen is you'll see a spell that has a Spectacle cost, and you may cast the spell for its Spectacle cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent lost life this turn. That means they could lose life from any source. You could attack and they lost life. You could hit them with a direct damage spell, they lost life. They could hurt themselves, like maybe they paid life for a shock land. However, if they lose life on their turn, it doesn't mean I can play Acrobat because I can only play that, of course, on a main phase. It's a creature. So it doesn't change that rule, but look for those opportunities to, whenever possible, play a spell for the Spectacle cost. Sometimes the Spectacle cost will be more than the mana cost, but when that happens, you'll have another ability typically attached to it. Gruul. Gruul's about big, stompy creatures. They just want to run you over, trample over you, and they have the riot mechanic. And I've been mentioning this all week, one of my favorite mechanics. If I play a creature with riot, I get to decide if it's going to come into play with haste or a +1/+1 counter. Also important to note, riot does stack. So if the creature on the right here were to enter the battlefield, and I have another ability that's going to give it riot, it will actually get 2 riots, which means I get 2 decisions. I could add a +1/+1 counter and give it haste. I could add 2 +1/+1 counters, or I could give it haste twice for some reason if I really wanted to. So remember that, because that could be relevant. Now the other thing that's cool about Riot is it does play with +1/+1 counters, so it does tie in really well with what Simic's trying to do too. You might have those opportunities to splash colors and try to work that to your advantage as well. Last thing I want to mention is 4 or 5 color good stuff. If you feel like you want to go super deep and get greedy with colors, you can do that with Guild Gates because you are going to get a Guild Gate in every pack instead of a basic land within this set. So that's possible. It's really more of a draft strategy than a sealed strategy, but it's something to remember that if you have these cards like Gatebreaker Ram here that get better with Guild Gates, you might have some opportunities to take advantage of that. Just don't be closed off to it, in other words. Also, if you were to go like 4 or 5 color good stuff, and you happen to get the card High Alert, which is an Azorius card, you could also play Defender and High Toughness creatures, since High Alert makes those better. That might be a thing that you could do alongside with Guild Gates, so that's something to think about. Again, that's a very specific situation, but keep your mind open to things that are even outside of just the guilds. Every once in a while, you might be surprised. Alright, let's talk about split cards and hybrid mana. Now, the hybrid mana symbol is on the left side here on Depose. That means I can either use a white or a blue in this example. That's how hybrid works. It gives you a little more flexibility. Secondly, split cards. How do they work? Well, basically when this is in your hand, you get to choose which side to play. As for the split cards in this set, you can only cast one side or the other at a time. So you can't cast both. You have to choose. So in this case, if I choose to play Depose, then this will go to the stack, then go to my graveyard, and I can't play Deploy, unless of course I can get the card back into my hand and then play it separately. Or vice versa. If I choose to play Deploy, I can't use Depose. So depending on what's going on in the game, sometimes Depose will be better, sometimes Deploy will be better, but these type of cards do give you some flexibility, which is nice. As for color identity, this example would be white and blue. And when it comes to converted mana cost, you actually add up both sides, so it would be a total of 6 if it's in your hand or graveyard. But if it's on the stack, it only counts as the one card that you're using. So on the stack, Depose would have a converted mana cost of 2. You would completely ignore Deploy. It would still be a blue and white card, though. So just keep that in mind. It might be useful from time to time. All right, with that being said, that's our pre-release primer. Let me know how your pre-release goes this weekend. Good luck to everybody out there. And as always, thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon and have a great day.